Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got another news and review here to discuss. In today's we're looking at signing from our past couple of days, some very interesting injury updates, training camp cuts, news updates, some waiver updates, and we've got some trade rumors involving the Wild, the Sharks, and the Toronto Maple Leafs, with all the updates regarding all these teams coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before we begin this video, do not forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget the subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and don't forget to stay tuned for videos coming out in the very near future. So in today's video, we've got another news and rumor video here to discuss. As per usual, we're going to be starting off by looking at some signings for our past couple of days. We saw one signing, and it was just before I started to record this video here, and it was in the Anaheim Ducks organization. Mason McTavish is finally signed. Mason McTavish, who's a 22-year-old center/left winger, just finished his ELC last year, had a pretty solid season, putting up 22 goals and 52 points in 76 games. Was an RFA, one of the last remaining big RFAs, and he finally got extended. He's probably going to get into a couple of preseason games and get into the end of training camp, which is very good for his conditioning. But he signs a 6-year contract extension, AAV of $7 million. Just a couple of videos ago, we were talking about how McTavish wanted somewhere around the 7 to 8 year deal, like a $7 to $8 million AAV, and we looked at how the Ducks really wanted a 5-year deal around a $5.5 million AAV. So it seems that the sort of sell in the middle on both term and the AAV, as McTavish gets a $7 million deal, which may be a little more in McTavish's favor, and they sort of sell in the middle of a 6-year extension term. So very interesting note there. I think McTavish is poised for a big season this upcoming year, and it's very good news that the Anaheim Ducks are finally able to get him signed, and this sort of a situation doesn't have to linger on any longer. So very interesting note there. But Mason McTavish has signed a new deal to keep him in the Anaheim Ducks organization. So very interesting note there. But that's the only signing we saw from our past couple of days. Next, going over to a couple of injury updates. We got a couple of very interesting injury updates that we look at here. So first, Jamie Benn has suffered a collapsed lung. He'll be out 4 weeks at least for the Dallas Stars. So it's a bad blow there. Hopefully Ben is okay. It sounds probably a lot worse than it is, but that's just an awful blow there for Ben. I think it could be a little bit longer than 4 weeks, but at this current point in time, I'll put him out until late October, maybe early November. So the Stars are going to be without their captain for the foreseeable future. So a bad blow there for Dallas. Ethan Sampson, who's a prospect in the Philly Flyers organization, is going to be out 6 to 8 weeks with upper body injury, while Bonk, Dort, and Pettersson, all in the Flyers organization, are out day to day. So it seems like Bonk, Dort, and Pettersson should be back in the next couple of days and should return in the very near future from their injuries, while Sampson is probably going to start the season on season opening injury reserve, and that's probably going to prematurely end his training camp and his chance to make the NHL team. So that's a bad blow there for Sampson. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is practicing after missing the start of training camp with a minor injury. So it sounds like Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is progressing well, and he said that he feels that he should be ready to go for a start of the season. That could be a big boost there for the Sabres. Jiri Kulich suffered a tweak in morning skate and shouldn't be out for longer than a few days. So he suffered a minor tweak. He's going to be out for a couple of days with that injury. It doesn't seem like it's going to be anything too severe though, so that's good news there for the Buffalo Sabres. Joel Blomqvist will be out at least 4 weeks for the Pittsburgh Penguins with a lower body injury. It's a bad blow there for Blomqvist. He was in contention to make the team with guys like Jarry and Seelaws. I think at this point now it's guaranteed that at least to start the season, Jarry and Seelaws will be the Penguins tandem, and then depending on how they play going forward and how Blomqvist does recover from injury, sort of like Ben, he's going to be out until at least late October. It could be a little bit longer, so very interesting note there. Mitchell Reimer has underwent wrist surgery and is out indefinitely, so I think Reimer had a really hard time to potentially make the roster out of training camp for Toronto, but it seems like he's going to be out probably at least a couple of weeks, if not a couple of months, with his current injury. David Reinbacher suffered a broken hand that same game that Reimer suffered an injury, and he's going to be out for the next 4 weeks. So it's a bad blow there for the Montreal Canadiens. Reinbacher suffered a whole bunch of injuries in the past, so seeing him suffer another injury that's going to cut out his training camp time short and potentially make him miss the opportunity to make the team. Is a bad blow there for the Habs. Once again, we'll probably go until late October, early November at the very least. Nils Holmglander is out week to week with a lower body injury, so it's a bad blow there for the Canucks. Could be out until the start of the season, so it's not good news there for the Canucks. Alexander Barkov, which is a separate video about, you guys can go check it out. It's on the channel. We talked about how Barkov suffered some sort of a massive injury that was going to be season ending. Apparently, the official wording is that he's torn his ACL and his MCL, and he's going to be out for the next 7 to 9 months. That return date puts him between April and June. So with that in mind, there's a very likely chance Barkov could miss the rest of the season, and if he misses the season, then he has to miss the playoffs too. So there's a very good chance the Panthers at some point do put him on season-ending injury reserve, which will keep him out for the regular season and the postseason, which will be really bad news. We would allow them to trade for some help, whereas if Barkov is probably going to be back closer to the playoffs, they're not going to be able to get that cap relief, so very interesting note there. And then Denton Matejchuk, who's missed a couple of preseason games for the Columbus Blue Jackets, could be cleared to go as early as Monday for contact, so that's very good news there. Matejchuk's a guy who could challenge for a roster spot this upcoming season, so to see him be cleared to contact potentially early this week will be very good news there for the Jackets. So very interesting updates here regarding all these guys in Benn, Samson, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, Kulik, Blomqvist, Reifi, Reinbacher, Höglander, Barkov, and Matejchuk, so very interesting note there. Next, going back over to a couple of very interesting training camp cuts. Once again, as we just talked about in our last couple of videos, I'll just list the amount of guys that got cut on each certain teams, plus a couple of the bigger names. So Buffalo cut 2 players. Calgary cut 14 players off their roster, including Adam Basha, Martin Furk, and Etienne Morin, all to the AHL. Colorado cut 3 players. Columbus cut 1 player. Edmonton also cut 14 players, including moving Bu Aki, Connor Klamberg, Jaden Grube, and Rem Pitlick, all to the AHL. The LA Kings cut 2 players. That's moving Bruce Skevich, who was the recent first-round pick, as well as Woolley, one of their top-end defensive prospects, to the OHL. The Predators cut 2 players, including moving Cam Reed to the OHL. The New York Islanders cut 13 players, including moving Matthew Maggio and Kylie Odelius to the AHL. The Senators cut 17 players, including moving Tyler Boucher, Thomas Hamara, and Dijibril Turi to the AHL. The Flyers cut 10 players, including moving Wisdom, Peretz, Rizzo, and Robertson to the AHL. Pittsburgh cut 1 player. San Jose cut 4 players, including moving Martin Havla to the AHL. Utah cut 21 players, including moving Lutz, Nord, Sisbar, and Walker to the AHL. The Canucks moved Maineo to the AHL. That was their 1 training camp cut, and the Caps cut 2 players. So some very interesting updates when it comes to training camp cuts, as those were some very interesting players that were cut and sent to either the AHL or went back to juniors. So very interesting note there. And then we also got our first taste of waivers a couple of days ago. The waiver wire opened, so we got a couple of players who have clear waivers and a couple of players who are currently on waivers, which we'll talk about in our next trade rumor video. So Connor Ingram in Utah, as well as Eklund in Philadelphia, and Bon Giovanni, Pilon, Crotty, Bourgault, and Shepard all in Ottawa were all placed on waivers yesterday, and they wound up clearing. So I think a lot of people were surprised Ingram was cleared, but he does have a pretty high cap, so that does make some sense, at least in my opinion. All the other guys are mostly AHL level guys at this point, so I think it comes as no surprise that they wound up clearing. And currently on waivers is Fedotov in the Jackets organization, Foodie, Gauthier, McWard, and Mitchell in the Islanders organization, Connaughton in the Mammoth organization, and Rosen and Stillman in the Caps organization. I think most of these guys will clear. Fedotov, I think, is the big name, but he's carrying a $3 million cap, so I don't think very many teams would be open to acquiring him. Foodie, maybe, as well as Rosen. Like, Foodie and Rosen could be like depth NHL level guys, so maybe there's a team or two out there who are lacking a little bit of depth who could claim them, but I definitely think most of these guys who are placed on waivers at this current point in time will probably clear tomorrow, so very interesting note there. And lastly, going over to a couple of news updates. So very interesting news updates here. First, when it comes to some PTO updates, the Toronto Maple Leafs has signed James Reimer to a PTO. This probably has something to do with Joseph Woll being on his leave of absence. They could definitely use some more added goaltending depth. Reimer, who used to play for Toronto a handful of years ago, could be a really solid like 3rd, 4th stringer and just provide some goaltending depth. So that's a very interesting PTO to watch. Well, Scott Harrington, Nationals organization, has been released from his PTO, so not too surprised there. Harrington was an AHL level guy, so not too surprised. The Boston Bruins have hired former NHL players Zdeno Chara, former big-time Boston Bruin player, to hockey ops roles, an advisor and a mentor. So very interesting note there. Chara was a really solid player for a number of years in the Bruins organization, so good to see it. They wound up hiring him, and he's going to be a part of the hockey ops operation as an advisor and a mentor. So very good stuff there. And then when it comes to a couple of signing updates, apparently according to some recent reports, the Avalanche want to extend Necas in season, so they want to give Necas a little more time to get acclimated in Colorado because he was in-season acquisition last year, and they're hoping maybe sometime in like December or January, once he's had a couple more months to be acclimated into Colorado, he'll be able a little bit more willing to sign an extension. So we should wait and see on that. Well, when it comes to the Buffalo Sabres and Alex Tuch, some recent reports are saying they are far apart on an extension. So I personally think a Tuch AAV should be between the $7 and $8 million mark. Like, I think that's sort of where he is. But there's been some rumblings from some sources saying that Tuch's AAV could be around the $9 million, maybe even $10 million mark with the cap going up and how big of a piece he's been in the Sabres organization. So I think that'll be a little bit high, but that could be as to why the Buffalo Sabres and Tuch are far apart on a current contract extension. It could also be the fact that none of the big players have yet signed extensions in the NHL. So very interesting note there. But those are all the updates when it comes to training camp cuts, waiver updates, injury updates, and other pieces of news. And next, going over to the trade rumors. So we've got a couple of trade rumors here to talk about. We're going to start off with the San Jose Sharks. So when it comes to the San Jose Sharks, some recent reports, I think it was with an interview, or might have just been some speculation and some rumblings, saying that Alex Wennberg would prefer to stay in San Jose instead of being moved. Now, Wennberg is one of a number of pending UFAs in the San Jose Sharks organization who could get dealt, along with guys like Carl Grundstrom on the forward group, as well as guys like Klingberg, Liljegren, and Ferraro on the defensive end. And there's probably a couple of other guys too that I'm forgetting at this point in time who are currently UFAs and could be dealt, but Wennberg's one of the more intriguing ones. He's entering the final year of his deal. He's got a $5 million cap hit, and he's a guy who can easily be a second or third line center on most NHL level teams. But apparently, according to Wennberg, he said he was brought in to be sort of like a veteran presence and help this young core grow in the San Jose Sharks organization, and he'd be open to staying. So I'm not sure if the Sharks will grant him his list or not. We've heard a couple of people in the past, especially in the Sharks organization, say they would love to stay in San Jose, but because of the Sharks and how much value they have, they still wind up getting moved. Maybe he gets moved and maybe sent back with the Sharks in the offseason. That is a possibility. It's not a likely one, but it's a very interesting situation to watch out for. I don't think the Sharks are going to be moving every single one of their pending UFAs. I think they're just going to be moving maybe like a couple of the ones that have the most value on them. But apparently, according to some recent reports, Wennberg would love to stay in San Jose, and if they can work together on a contract extension, he would probably love to stay in the San Jose Sharks organization. So very interesting note there. But keep your eye on Alex Wennberg. He's a very likely trade candidate for the San Jose Sharks, but he's a guy who also really wants to stay in the San Jose Sharks and be a part of the solution there. So we shall wait and see what happens with Alex Wennberg going forward. Next, going over to Frank Seravalli. Now, he was talking about the Minnesota Wild and Marco Rossi. He said when it comes to Marco Rossi that he knows that Rossi and the Wild got done on an extension. I think it was like, what, a 3-year, $5 million AAV deal. About a week and a half ago, they were able to come to terms on an extension, and Rossi's now signed. But Seravalli does say that if the right deal came along, the Minnesota Wild would be open to moving Marco Rossi for the right price. So it seems like even though Rossi has been signed, he's not been taken off the trade block, maybe to a lesser extent. But I definitely do think that the Wild are still on rocky terms with Rossi. I think if Rossi could find another solution, he'd be a little bit happier. So once again, I don't think it's a guarantee that Rossi gets moved because he's signed now, 3 years of $5 million. And if you can replicate the sort of season he had last year and sort of be the long-term solution as like the second or third line center in Minnesota, I think the Wild will be happy keeping him. But if the right deal came along and it got the Wild something that they really wanted, whether that's like another top 4 defenseman or a top 6 forward or a second line center or something like that, something that could really improve this team, I think the Wild would consider it. I don't think Rossi is by any means off the table now that he's signed. I think along with Frank Seravalli, that if the right deal came along, the Minnesota Wild will be open to moving Marco Rossi as long as it was able to improve their team. So I think this sort of an extension just buy them a little bit of time, that they didn't have to move him at this current point in time. But if Rossi has another solid start to the season and they get to their trade deadline and they're getting calls on Rossi, I would, for one, not be one bit surprised if at the trade deadline or maybe next offseason, if the offers were good enough, they could try and move Marco Rossi again. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But Frank Seravalli does say that if the right trade did come up, the Wild will not hesitate to move Marco Rossi, so we should wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to Chris Johnston. According to a recent report from him, he says that the Leafs, even though they have been trying really hard to try and make something work, they have not found a trade to move a forward to their liking. So we know that we've heard a lot of speculation over the past couple of weeks weeks and months that the Maple Leafs are trying to move a couple of forwards. There's been linkage of guys like Jarnkrok being on the block, Kampf being on the block, Robertson being on the block. There might even be a couple of other guys that I'm forgetting being on the block. So there's a couple of guys who could want to be moved from the Maple Leafs, but according to Chris Johnston, they haven't gotten the right offers yet. So my guess would be Robertson, someone who they'd be a little more hesitant to trade unless they get a really big offer. And even though they're open to trading Jarnkrok and Kampf, I don't think very many teams want them because Jarnkrok's coming off a season where he had a lot of injuries, and he's currently making a $2.1 million cap hit. So a lot of teams don't know what they're getting. Well, Kampf is an overpaid fourth line center making $2.4 million for 2 more seasons. He's even on an expiring contract at this point. So unless the Leafs maybe take a lesser of a return or maybe have to attach a sweetener, I don't think Jarnkrok and Kampf at this point in time are overly likely trade candidates, and it seems that they are a little bit reluctant, according to Chris Johnston, to move Nick Robertson because of his potential still, but they would be open to moving it for maybe like the right price that they haven't gotten yet at this current point in time. So even though the Leafs are still looking to try and move a couple forwards and trying to work out a deal with a couple of other teams, they haven't found a deal that is to their liking, which is why there hasn't been a Jarnkrok, Kampf, or Robertson trade at this current point in time. So we should wait and see on that. Once again, no guarantees that these guys won't be traded at some point, potentially even by the start of the regular season, but at least at this point in time, the Maple Leafs haven't been able to make any sort of a trade revolving these players. So very interesting out there. But those are all the updates I want to talk about here today. Those are all the rumors. I'll let you guys thoughts. What do you think about Rossi? Do you think the Wild would trade him if the right deal came along? Do you think Wennberg signs the extension in San Jose? And do you think the Maple Leafs will still trade a forward, whether that be Jarnkrok, Kampf, or Robertson? Definitely your thoughts on all of that. Plus all the other news that we talked about and the signing. I left your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video. If you like to subscribe below. Thank you for all your support. I would never be able to do all of you guys if you haven't already. Don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to stay tuned for more videos coming out in the very near future. I also have a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, if that's when you check that out. I'll link to that in the description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.